This is Nina Smith. Nina is from Getty Images. She's also the wife of our intrepid Director of Operations, Michael Smith. And Nina is an amazing photographer who will give you a wealth of information.
Oh, I thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Sorry for the late start. Oh, thank you. As John said, Mike Smith is my husband, so I'm a big fan of the Academy. I'm really always impressed and amazed by all the work that everyone does here. So happy to help pitch in and give you some tips on how to photograph your artwork. First question I have is, how long generally does it take for everyone here to finish a painting? Anybody from the audience? How long? Anybody?
Me, 6 months. A month.
Right, a month, a long time, right? We spend like a whole semester here honing our skills and working really hard to create like a beautiful masterpiece. And then you see in your email this amazing show that you want to be part of because you have this great piece of work. And then you run outside, you take your cell phone, and you take a picture in 2 seconds and use it for the jury. Is that anybody's like experience with how they share their artwork? And so what I'm hoping is to give you a moment to be considerate for how you represent your artwork digitally, because it's just as important as how you consider your artwork when you're creating it. Because everybody initially will not get to experience your artwork in person. They'll only experience that little digital file that you see. So it's just as important to be considerate about how you create the digital file as it is how you create the actual artwork. So that's kind of where I start from, because I think it's really, really important, and I think it's often overlooked. So equipment, it's key. You know, I know it's hard to buy really expensive gear. Consider it an investment if you can. While you're at the Academy, there's all this great equipment you can use. So I would say take advantage of it all. A DSLR is the way to go because you can adjust and set your exposures, and you get less lens distortion and better quality files. I mean, iPhone 13 is like an amazing camera, so I can't deny it, but I wouldn't say it's the best way to do it. So you can, but it's just harder for you in post-production. So DSLR camera, lots of options for you to make it just that much better. Also, the lighting is super important. I don't know if any of you have shot and you shot like outside during the day or in your house with the lights on and you get a lot of mixed color, and it's really hard to color correct because you have all these different color sources. So mixing your lighting makes it so much harder. It's really important to start with these 2 really solid light sources so that you can get very even, consistent results. These are Toto, like professional photo floodlights, and they're roughly around $300. This kit is here for you to use at the school, but also if you couldn't go that route, you can get the studio lights that you use in your studios, those can lights. Those work really well if you get bulbs that match. So you can consider that, and I would try to not get like daylight bulbs. You should get like more warmer tungsten bulbs because they're easier to color correct. Sorry? Oh, the bulb? Oh, so I would say use not those like newer bulbs, those like LED colors. I would try to get just like incandescent, like 3200 color bulbs. They're just easier to color correct. If you have to shoot in a place that like you can't control the lighting, like this room is amazing because there's no windows. You can turn all the lights off. If you have to shoot in your house or your apartment, shoot at night, because then you don't have the lights from your window affecting the exposure or the color, because that will throw it all off. Reflectivity is really tricky, right? Like try not to shoot everything once it's framed, because that will make your life hell. So if you're going to frame something, frame it after. If you're gonna shellac it or put some super shiny thing on it, like crazy glossy, like try to do it after. Like it's just much trickier to color correct or fix in post, and the light you'll see it like reflective. Try not to shoot wet. That's also a consideration because it will be really shiny and you'll hit it in spots and you'll see it. It's also really important when you're shooting to not try to throw your picture on the floor. because you're going to get like a lean and a distortion. So you want to use a really nice flat surface of a wall. If you have to use your easel, consider that your easel is not straight, right, when you're working. So try to level it if you have to. So those are just some kind of like general tips, I think, for getting started. And if you try to follow those, you'll start off on like a better foot. Also, like something to, what you wouldn't consider normally, like you're shooting everything horizontal when you're shooting this way because it's much easier to level the camera and to level for your eye. So even though your painting is vertical most of the time, right? Or maybe not, or square, but you don't want to shoot it vertically because when you tilt the camera, it's much harder to level. So you can correct this really easily in Photoshop. So it's just helps you along. So if you have the right environment, you have all the right gear, you're so much further away or further along to getting really great files. So if you guys want to come up and we can talk a little bit more about like the actual setup, it's kind of easier to see like close up. It's up to you. We can talk a little bit more about the settings on the cameras and the gear that you can actually like see it. So, yeah, and feel free to throw them out as we're talking. Like if you all have like use case scenarios that can help guide the story, and I can help you out more specifically. Safety first. These lights, they're called hot lights. Not because they're cute, it's because they get extremely hot. So like don't touch them once they've been on. If you can work in a scenario where you don't have to turn them on immediately, leave them off. The umbrellas that we're using for this are specifically umbrellas for this kind of light. So if you buy this kit, get these umbrellas. If you use a regular reflective umbrella, it will catch on fire. So that's my safety warning. Watch your cords when you're working. Like this is not ideal, right? It's just like in your studio, like create like a safe environment for yourself so you don't like trip and kill yourself on the light stand or the tripod or the cords. So I know that sounds really obvious, but I think just be considered about your environment as well. Black fabric is the easiest way to shoot 2D work against. It eliminates shadows. Like if you see like you start to get these like edges, they don't help you. You don't need them. This is far more forgiving. It's more from when like you used to shoot slides instead of digital, because now mostly you're cropping in. But if you want to leave an edge to your work, you don't want a white wall because it will just look like not amazing, because if you change the color will look wacky. So black is the best. Make it nice and tight. Velvet is the best kind of fabric, but this is fine because mostly you're not going to see it. Try to clean it if you can. Don't give lint on it. Keep it straight, but you're not going to see it, so it doesn't have to be perfect. The painting itself should be as level as humanly possible. So if you don't have one, buy level. Use your phone level, like whatever. But make sure that you are level. Because if you're not level here, you can't get level there, and then you'll get lens distortion, which I know I've heard someone else mentioned earlier that that's a difficulty for them. So once you're level, you have enough space on your black around your picture, you can turn on your lights. Like you probably shouldn't leave them on this whole time, but this is what we have. So these lights are awesome because they create a really broad, even cast of light versus like your studio lights are more like focal, right? Like you see like the center more in them. These lenses, these lights are horizontal. Like if you look at the bulb itself, it creates like a really even spread. So they do almost all the work for you, like they're amazing. You can use them two different ways, depending on your painting. You can shoot with them using the umbrella and bounce it if your painting is very reflective. This painting is not. So you could shoot it directly. You kind of have to play with it a little and see what works the best for you. Hey, Peter. I think, in general, if you're worried about reflection or like hitting a hot spot in your picture, the umbrella is the better way to go. So if you guys want to see, I can show you how to put it on so that you know. I don't know if anyone has any experience with lights like these. Does anyone? All right, come on up, come look. Don't be shy. So these umbrellas work like umbrellas, right? There's nothing crazy there. And then when you look in here, there's a little screw. And then you would just, it's kind of counterintuitive. You're putting the umbrella in front of the light, not behind it, because the light is going to be turned around and then bounced. So, and this is kind of a great technique for softening light in general, like if you're shooting a model or if you want not like such a harsh shadow. Helps if I look at it.
I didn't get you in my photo, don't worry.
Thank you. Actually, can you just take that?
Yep.
And it just pops right through, right? Just like that. No, I'm sorry. Okay, let go. So then you would use it. I mean, you can shoot, and now you guys are the artwork, basically. So you turn it and shoot this way with it. You can see it made it darker, right? Oh, what's your question? For sure, I would say. I mean, that's like an aesthetic choice though. Like you can't do it just because you want it all to photograph well. Like, so I'm not, no offense to glossy people. It's just harder to shoot. You can do different things like filter the gloss, and Photoshop helps a lot. But I would say if it doesn't change the aesthetics greatly, you should wait and then shoot it and then gloss it. Sure, go. It just depends on if you wanted to see those kind of highlights in your sculpture, right? Like if you want the light to like hit off it like a highlight, then yes. Like, but if you don't want it to look shiny or distracting, then no. Like I would say it's aesthetic, really. Like a lot of people, when you see a painting, you want to see it for the painting. You don't want to see like a hot light and like be distracted by like, oh look, that spot's shiny. Like you know that you don't want people to focus on it. But if it's part of the consideration for the work and you want to highlight, like then for sure, then it's great, you know. But this is great, like is even and the most like accurate representation of what your work is. So once you have your setting, your awesome room with no window light or daylight or crazy fluorescent lights, you have your black wall, you have your level painting, you have your lights and your umbrellas. You will try to create basically like a big glow of light around your work so that you get the most even light you can create for your paintings. Once you set this up, like I could say shoot for the biggest piece first, because then you have it even for everything. And then you can go smaller, smaller, smaller. It's easier than going small, big, 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 because then you have to reset. So another important, well, that's not the microphone, sorry. Another important piece of equipment that the school has for you is a light meter, which helps you create an even spread of the lights, because you can't really see it with your eye. This can judge it for you to know that it's even. It's important. It's very easy to use. I know it's a very foreign device for most people who are drawing and painting majors, but it is just basically reading the light for us. So it's very helpful, as long as I can turn it on. Okay. So the important part about this light meter, and if you guys want to come look at it, the important thing is that the ISO of the light meter matches your ISO in the camera, because then it will tell you what your exposure should be. And generally, you want to stay on the lower ISOs for this. 200 is the safe bet. Like anything else, I feel like now digital cameras are so much better. You could shoot this at like 1,000 and it would be fine, but it's just sharper. So I would just say, if you're finding that the exposure is really long and it's blurry, you're having issues, you can go up. But okay, so we're at 200. I know I'm at 200 here. So now I will take my light meter, and it's important you're not in the shadow of the light, like it's not me. Like you want to get it against the painting. That's okay. So if you look here, if you guys want to come up, you can see. I don't know, you people lecture with masks and glasses. It's like impossible. Interesting. Okay, so you would light meter here to get a reading to see it's telling me to shoot it at 500th of a second at f/5.8, which is basically what your camera settings are going to be. And so I want to shoot it a little bit bigger because I want it to be sharper. So, but first what I want to do is I want to double check that it's the same on all the corners. Because these lights are so brand new and broad, they should really be the same. So this is f5.9, this is f5.8, and then you're gonna come over here, and you're gonna do the same thing. So this says f7, so that means that this is too bright. So we're gonna back it up a little. And I know it's funny, it seems really nitpicky, but you don't notice it as much until you shoot, that like one side is less even than the other side, and then adjusting it in the exposure in Photoshop is a little bit harder. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I would say try as hard as you can to get your light even. This is the super technical way to do it. So now it's f5.8, and now it's f5.6. So as long as they're all in like an even range, you can eye it, but as you can see, like these don't line up perfect. So they're not, the light bulbs change really quickly. They're different manufacturers, different shelf lives, whatever. And then you also want to do one in the center, because sometimes it can be falling off on the edges and the center will be really hot, and then you'll get like a vignette in your shot. So, yep, go ahead.
Do you prefer it to be brighter or darker before you go into post? Do we have to choose?
Probably darker, like if I had to say, because you can pull up a little, but you can only go so far, you know, like, I don't know if this sounds too technical, but I wouldn't try to do like more than a stop, like, you know, 20% correction, like if you don't have to. You shouldn't have to, so the next part of this will be bracketing. And so if you bracket, even if you're not matching perfectly, like what this light meter says to your camera, you should have an option. So, you know, you want to shoot at least 5 or 6 brackets. Who here knows the term bracketing? Or does anybody know it? Okay, perfect. So bracketing is when you shoot your exposure, you shoot it at the camera setting, then you shoot it darker, and then you shoot it lighter. So every time you shoot, you're getting 3 options. And so once you know, it might look great here, it's little, and then when you get to your computer, you're like, crap, this looks really dark. So the idea is that you shoot a variety of exposures so that you find the best one after. So, so when you shoot, so if you want to come look, like, I'm short, so you're welcome to see, but you know, you want to frame it with just a little bit of space around it because you want to fill the frame with your painting as much as possible. So you want to try to get it in the center. I would use the manual focus because sometimes autofocus doesn't really work across flat surfaces well. So drawings, sometimes that's really tricky because it doesn't see the detail. So sometimes if you have a friend and you get stuck, you can have them like stand in front of the picture for you to focus because the camera has nothing to focus on. So it has a really hard time sometimes with flat. So yeah, just dip in, photobomb like your picture, and then you should be okay. So when you shoot, you're gonna shoot, you know, and I would say like shoot way more than you think you need because you might kick the tripod, you might hit the shutter really quickly and you have like a little blur, like you're not gonna notice that stuff until after the fact, and then you're gonna be sad because you don't wanna set it back up. So it's important when you're shooting to set so this is tricky. How many people here have you ever used a camera like this? Like a DSLR? Oh, good. So some people, I would say you want to set it on manual shutter and aperture and match what the light meter tells you. So it should give you like a really close estimate of an accurate exposure. You can also use the auto in here because if the light meter is even, then this exposure should be really good. So the camera should know that you're good. So, but if you're using the auto, you have to you can use like a bracket setting, like a lot of cameras have a bracket setting where it will shoot all of them for you at once. But if not, you have to have the camera shoot the variety of exposures for you. So manual is easier, because so if you want to come over here, I can show you all if you want to look, or if you want to come look after. Like, it's important when you shoot to hold the shutter. Don't like jump on it, because then it will shake sometimes, because the shutter exposure will be slower. So it's really important to just like be gentle and like not feel like a truck driver and just like shoot it and like hit it really hard, because these are not as like amazingly sturdy as you think. So, and then when you shoot, I would say shoot two or three at like the perfect exposure, right? Which is what it's telling you here in the middle is like, yeah, we got it, it's perfect. The shutter and the aperture match. So by all intents and purposes, that should be your picture. But when you get it into your computer, you're gonna be like, wow, maybe that's a little dark. Maybe I like it a little lighter. So you will take your camera and you'll be adjusting like just slightly in each direction. So you see how the number is going down? So I would say, and if you see the difference, you can see it's getting darker. Yep.
So I have a question. So
Sure.
after you manually adjust the aperture and the shutter speed to the setting, you shouldn't be touching that, right? You're just adjusting.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to bracket, like, in truth, like, it should be good. But, a lot of times sometimes it's easier than adjusting in Photoshop to just do a little bracket. Like, and then you might like it better when you're not when you're in your house or you're in your computer, you just might feel like slightly lighter or darker, shows more detail. So, sure. So I would say you should bracket in both directions. Like, you want higher exposures and lower exposures, so you get a little range. For each photo, you should have like 6 pictures that you could choose from. So, and then drawing, I feel like, I don't know if you want to see, does anybody have any questions? It's a mix of like helping you with technical stuff and trying to get you to a place where you can actually do it. So, sure, go.
So with drawings, camera tend to sharpen lines and ignores all the nuances. Is there anything that we can do in setting that can adjust to that?
I mean, in that case, I do think the bracketing might help you because like you'll get like a little more subtler exposures. I think you could bring the lights closer for like a drawing to get like a little bit more detail. Some other tricks too, if you are shooting something reflective, you can use these lights differently. Like you can move, like if you see, this isn't reflective, but if we had something reflective, you can see the light move across the painting and the reflections tend to go away because what's happening is the light is bouncing and then hitting the lens, right? But if you had a reflection, you kind of want it to just hit away from the lens. So you will angle your lights a little differently. If we want, we could show a drawing. I don't think it's going to look that different, so maybe it helps to show. Does anybody want to see the 3D or a drawing? What do you vote for a drawing? 3D. Okay. All right, let's do the 3D quick. Okay, what's your question?
Before we move on, do you have any tips on shooting works on paper, no matter the medium?
Sure.
Okay.
How big?
And hanging. Painting signs.
So I think the hanging is the trickier part for those, obviously. If you use double-sided tape, like I don't know how sensitive the material is, so I always feel like that's also tricky. I know that you can create like tabs that you can pin in so that you have like something to pin on that's not the work. Have you seen like when curators hang like that? It's like a piece of tape that's tabbed up and then you pin on the tape versus like putting a hole right in your work, because I know that's like horrible. So, yeah, you like create like if this was tape, your piece, and then you hang it on that. You do still want to shoot it horizontal. Like I think that is important. Like if we put this vertical, you could see like all the angles will be wacky, cracky. Like you still want to shoot it the same way. So you might have to just be considerate of making sure it's flat. So you might need to put a couple of those like tape anchors across it. And in that case, you're probably cropping right into the picture and not showing the black, right? Because you don't want to be distracted. You'll see the pins, like they'll be reflective little like dings across it, right? So I would say you're probably cropping right to the edge so you don't see it. So yeah, no problem. And in some cases, really big pieces, I think, I know I see like at the Academy, everybody creates really big, amazing, beautiful work. Those are tricky because it's much harder to create that spread of light around a big painting. So sometimes you need 4 of these. Like if you have a really big painting, like that one in the background, like you might need to double up on your lights. You might be able to get away with it, but most likely you need double. Sure.
So you said that we should adjust the lighting as we're shooting to be reflective. Once we move the light, does that mean that the evenness is...
Yeah, you should check it all the time. Like if you adjust this, if you go smaller, you should be fine and you shouldn't have to adjust. But if you go bigger or you turn them around, or like you wouldn't want to shoot with like, for painting, 3D is different. Like you wouldn't want to shoot one this way and one that way for a drawing ever, because it's uneven. And you don't necessarily see it, but you'll see it in the file. Does that help? Cool. All right, so we can try to do the 3D. 3D is harder to talk about, like just in a general sense, because I think there's a lot more variables for people's work, like the kind of material, the environment, the size. Like there's so many things to consider for 3D, but I do think, yeah, we can take it down, thank you. I do think it's still applicable to shoot in a lot of these ways the same. Like you want to have a clean background, like you want the focus to be the picture, the piece, not your studio or the street that you shot it on. Like you want to create an environment that makes this the focus. So if you guys want to get closer, like I would not be able to see anything from where you are. So feel free. I would say, you know, presentation is key. Like I would not shoot this on this dirty silver table. I would try to create a space that makes me feel like I'm looking at it in a museum or a gallery, right? So it's like a beautiful, pristine spot for your sculpture. Unless that's part of the aesthetic and you want it to feel environmental, I feel like that could work for sculpture, but mostly not, right? Not here. So like just that changes everything, right? I know it sounds silly, but it really does. I would say background should match. I don't know if straight on is necessary for a sculpture, like it's not as important, like you want to see the dimensional aspects of it. So I feel like sculpture, a lot of times you need more than one picture, right? To tell the story of the piece. So I feel like it's a little more flexible. And the lighting is more flexible, like it doesn't have to be perfectly even because you want to see dimension. So I think this setup for sculpture is actually really good, like because you can have like an even setup and then, you know, just some fill. Like I would say that you can kind of really be playful with like a sculpture, or not playful, but experimental with how you light a sculpture. I would say it's still really important to look out for like hot spots. If you see hot spots, like you kind of need to do this with a buddy, because you need a person to be like looking at it from the camera, moving the light around with you. So like if you you said 3D, right? So come up and look in the frame, and then you can see how the lights move around, like what happens, right? So like you see like here, like you can change the way the picture, like the story, by like moving around, right? So it's subtle, but it is different. So I think one direction is not enough for a sculpture, and you're always using two, but I think something, you know, that's not enough light. Like you could never shoot it like that. It would just look really flat, like lost. So you need to fill both sides, but I don't think you need them to be as even, is how I would look at sculpture. I think you should also use the light meter if you have it, just get used to it. And then you want to make sure that they're not wildly different. So, this light meter is funny, sorry. All right, that's interesting, stop working. Okay, so but I would say if this was working, you would look at it and you would meter both sides. And if they're like wildly different, like you need to bring them closer together. Like you still want it to be even, but it doesn't have to be flat. So I don't know if that helps. It's kind of broad. And then I would still shoot it the same way. I would, especially in this case, because it will look different, I would bracket at least 5 or 6 times. Sure?
Do you prefer a black background always, or sometimes a white one?
I think it depends on the piece. Like if it's bronze, maybe not black, maybe gray. You know, like if it's too dark, like if it's a really dark sculpture, black is maybe not the best choice. You know, I think it looks great for this because it's clay, but like marble would look good here. Like, I think it's really dependent. That's why sculpture's tricky.
Right. And also, like some people use a gradation. Do you
Like, that's harder, to be honest, like to create a gradation. That's in the lighting. That's not like, maybe they do it in Photoshop, like maybe they black out the background and just put in a gradient. That's something you could do. I don't know if it's necessary. Like you, oh, like one of those like could, like, it's nothing wrong with it. Like, not necessarily. Like, I think.
You're asking about the aesthetics of an image when people look at it?
Well, some people buy a gradation paper to put behind it,
Right.
and for them, it gives them more of a 3D feeling.
So it's, and that's all great. Who are you showing it to? That's who you have to decide what your background is going to be. If you want to have a gradation, that's wonderful. But we're going to have jurors who are looking at these things, and they may or may not be, that may or may not be appealing to them.
It might be distracting. Like, I could see that, how it would just be take away from the sculpture. Like, so to me, I'm mixed about it too. Like, I think also there's some really great things. Like, if you had really small sculptures, you could get one of those like e-commerce light box things. Those things are awesome, and just like you could shoot anything in that, and it looks amazing. You could even use an iPhone for that. Like, but I would say if you have and also if you have drawings, I know the library has a copy stand, like an actual reproduction stand. Those are beautiful because they're completely pre-lit. You put the camera on it, and it's like you can shoot anything there. But tend to be for like things that are really small. So, but if you shoot like mini paintings or mini drawings, that's a great way to go. So, does anybody have any other questions? I was just going to talk quick about file management, because I think that's kind of important too. Good.
When you're working in different materials that might be more reflective or present different challenges as far as getting like consistent light throughout the piece, like do you have any recommendations as far as how to shoot, like something that's like clear or something that is...
Clear is, it's very tricky, clear, right? Because you just see what's behind it. Like, I would say in that case, like probably how is it supposed to read in the piece? Like, when you show it in a gallery, is that against a white wall? Like, so I would try to shoot it that way, like, and I would probably, I mean, you could, if it was your own fabric, you could cut a hole in it and you could shoot it, like, and it would be okay, right? Because then you would have the black around it, and that might be kind of cool because then you could see the clear. Like, if you frame it and you crop out the edges, you're not necessarily going to know it's clear. So that is a particularly tricky thing, I think. I mean, you could try to make it a little reflective, right? Like, so that you could tell, but I think it's hard to read that in a picture, truthfully. If there was something in it, like dimensionally, if there was like a thing in your clear space, like that helps, but I don't know if that throws off the aesthetic. So it depends on how big, like how important is that part of the piece in relative to the rest of it, and for people to understand it. Did you have a question? Or are you yawning? Sorry if I'm boring you. So I think just one thing to just talk a little bit about post-production, because I think that's even less, more overlooked than necessarily just shooting, because do you actually have a genuine question?
If you're moving on to post-production, one of the things that I always try to do when I'm taking a picture of sculpture, especially something very complex, is that I want my camera to be pulled back as far as I can and then zoom in. So
Why?
Why? Because you're flattening out the surface. It's just like a portrait. If you get up close to that sculpture, the nose is going to look too big in comparison to the ears. So it's just like having an iPhone right in your face. If you pull it back, use a zoom lens to bring it in, it flattens out the object. And it also is important that the level of the camera is not too close, just like with the
Absolutely.
painting. It shouldn't be pointed at the head and looking down at the feet. It should be somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And
So I would say long lens is, I understand why you're suggesting to create compression with like a long lens and like shoot further away, but that does flatten the piece. And if it's
gives
dimensional,
a better understanding of the piece in its structure. When you're projecting it or putting it on a screen, it's more understandable, and there's less distortion.
yeah, I think it just depends on what kind of space you have to work with as well, because, and also like if you have access to like a 200 millimeter lens, like I would not zoom in on a cell phone ever, because the quality, Yeah, the quality. Yeah, the quality on a cell phone, like I definitely would never zoom a cell phone, like especially for artwork. You could kind of get away with it for a sculpture, maybe, but the quality just degrades so fast. Like, because you're right, it's not a real zoom; it's just a zoom in the file. So, yeah, I do think that is an important thing to note, though. Like, whereas like your placement when you're shooting the sculpture, you shouldn't be at the top. Like, you should be more in the middle, kind of similarly to like your painting. So, and you can try. I mean, I feel like for what you're talking about with the zooming, it would have to be a really big piece. For that, like in this case, I don't know if that would matter. Do you?
It has to do with your field of vision. If it's a large angle,
Right.
that's going to distort.
Right.
If it's a shallow angle, it'll be flatter image.
Right.
It'll have less distortion.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that like your only example of your sculpture should be like a really sharp angle. Like I think, I would only give it like a little bit of an angle when I'm showing it. I wouldn't, unless you want to show like a straight profile of it, which you could, like a 360. But I think
I was talking about the cone of vision. If it's a narrow cone of vision, that's less distortion. If it's a wide cone of vision, there's a lot of distortion between the top and the bottom and the center.
But if you're using like a 50 millimeter lens, like you should have less of that. If you're using wide angle lens, definitely you'll have more of that distortion, especially if you're closer. So I would try to shoot in the middle still. I think that can work, and I really like that look where like you compress with a long lens and you get that flat like feeling, and I could see how that would be useful in some sculptures. But I think it's definitely something that has to be like kind of experimented. That's why sculpture is not as like, put it on the wall, make it really even. Like it's really dependent on the work itself. So, but I think those are good points.
Yeah, and if you have like a larger piece, like let's say you have like a life-size sculpture, and you need, like how, if you have to back further away to get all of it in, like how you compensate with the light? Do you just add more umbrellas?
I mean, you can get closer, like you shouldn't need like 10 lights to light it. I think you might need 3. Like you can have like a little bit of a fill and then 2 even lights, and you can create some dimension. I would say, sculpture's trickier, you want to frame it closer to the space, right? So just keep that in mind if you're shooting something larger. Like you want to have enough space so that you fill the picture so it's not like a little bit of black and then a lot of the wall. Like, so you want to create that environment so it still feels like you're in a studio or a gallery. So, anybody else? Okay, so just really quick for post-production, if you do spend the time and experiment in camera, like don't be shy, take your time, like take an hour to shoot a picture for one painting. Like the more you do it, the better you get at it. Like to your point about shooting sculpture, like you only learn that from trial and error. Like from looking at your sculptures and saying like, this looks distorted, I don't like it. Like how am I gonna get it better? Like you have to do it to get good at it. Once you have the files, learn to create like an archive system for yourself so that your stuff is organized, because most of people don't like consider how you keep your files organized. Make a copy, don't touch the original, like put it somewhere where you can't touch it, because what ends up happening is people change the file size requirements, because most gallery submissions are like 72 dpi, 3 inches, like very small, and then you lose your original. You save and you're like, oh no, I saved the original. Like that happens a lot. Like don't do that. Like you take all this time, like take a copy of the originals, make a copy, put them in an archive folder. Use like a naming system that works for you, that is organized. Like name your stuff by month maybe, or some way that you have a system to keep your stuff easily accessible when you need it fast, because most of the time you see these exhibitions, deadline's tomorrow, like so you don't want to spend 3 hours like, where did I put this file? Like, so create that for yourself early, because then you can use it your whole life as an artist, so that you can manage your assets that way, because the files are just as important as the pieces. So, because you also don't want to have to dig your stuff out after you spent hours trying to create the best photo and redo it. Nobody wants to redo it. I would say, edit everything in the full size. Like don't look at it in thumbnails, don't look at it on the camera. Like really take the time to create like the perfect set. Delete all the bad ones so that they're out of your life. Like you don't need the bad ones. They just make it messy. It's okay to clone, like, Photoshop's gotten so advanced. Like, we used to do this in slides, and you had to get everything perfect. And now you have so much more leeway, like perspective correction, a little bit of cloning out highlights. Like, that's not going to hurt you, I think, if you're comfortable in Photoshop. So, and that takes practice as well. So, and also, like, I know this is like a silly tip, but really follow the directions when you submit files for your exhibits or your residencies or whatever you're supplying for, because not being able to follow the directions basically rules you out, like, immediately. Like, follow the naming, follow the file sizes, submit it exactly how it's asked, because that just means you can't follow directions. So I think it's silly, but people make those mistakes all the time when they're managing their files. So I see that kind of daily. So, and that's kind of everything. I don't know if anybody has any more questions. I know it's a lot of info. I'll share over my email. You guys can ask me questions whenever. But thank you for letting me talk for an hour. Thank you, good luck. Yeah.
What is the best? Is Lightroom good? Like, what is
I love Lightroom. It's great for editing. I think it is great for certain things, but you can't do as much like perspective correction or cloning in Lightroom, so you still have to bring it into Photoshop. But Photoshop's not a great editor tool. Like, you can't pick really fast, like, you can't compare. Like, Photoshop, you have to open every single file. Like, Bridge sucks. I would not recommend it. I would say Lightroom and Photoshop together is all you really need. I mean, you could use iPhoto for some stuff, but I don't think you can do like that much cloning or perspective correction in iPhoto. I'm not your photos, whatever it is now, but it's good for editing. So, but if you have Photoshop, you probably have Lightroom, right? Because it's part of the cloud suite now. So, yeah. I think the photo kit of like Adobe Cloud is like Lightroom, Photoshop, and Bridge. So, yeah.
It's available to you in the library.
Right. I think that's just how to get it.
Yeah, Adobe Cloud now is more reasonable than it used to be. Like, there's student versions, so I think it is worth checking it out. Apple Photo you can use for editing, but I don't think you can really use it for like the rest of the retouching. So, yeah, Lightroom is part of it. So like Adobe Cloud is like a suite of like 85 different applications. Like, but there's like a photo version, and it comes with like a couple of them. So, yeah, you bet. Thank you so much. Good luck, everybody. And don't forget, the stuff's all in the library, so use it while you have access to it.